So let's talk a little bit about the Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
Sure.
Going back to the original.
Yeah. Well, I was alive when it was on. I don't know if I remember seeing it when I was alive, when I was that young. But I do recall sort of as early a memory as I can conjure seeing the characters and then sort of growing up with them because they were on and in reruns throughout the 60s and 70s. And so because I became such a big fan of animation, obviously was watching animation all the time on television as much as I could get, and so I was watching the Rocky and Bullwinkle, obviously, and Mr. Peabody and Sherman were kind of particularly my favorites on the show. So obviously I was very steeped in the lore because that was what made Jay Ward's material so great, was it kind of worked on a number of different levels. So it would be great for kids. You could take it at face value, but then there was always these great references and jokes that, you would not get as a kid. But as you get older, if you kind of stuck with it or came back to it, it's sort of like, oh, now I understand what that means. And that's kind of was always a fun thing about it. So it was definitely something we wanted to do for the film.
Yeah! Someone left this for us! A present. Nice.
It looks just like our horse.
Should I bring it inside?
It'd be rude not to.
Go!
Peabody here.
I did not see that coming.
I love the Oedipus joke. I love it when Agamemnon says it's going to his house at the holidays is awkward. Because it would be, frankly.
Yeah.
Patrick Wharburton is.
And that's that's an example very much of the joke that kids aren't going to get because they're not going to get the reference.
Right.
The adults will get it, and then kids later will get it and go like, who's Oedipus? I'm like, oh, now I understand why it's awkward.
Well, Patrick Wharburton is such a character anyway.
Oh my God, he's amazing. He's so good. He's really good. I mean, he's like, you work with certain actors, and Patrick Wharburton is one of them, and they're just, they can deliver a line 50 ways, and each way is better than the next. Nathan Lane was like that in Lion King.
Yeah.
And then you have a hard time in the editing room choosing what's the best line.
What was it like working with Mel Brooks?
Oh my God. Well, that was so much fun for two reasons. First of all, because I'd worked with him before. When I just finished the second Roger Rabbit short cartoon called Roller Coaster Rabbit in Orlando, Florida, and I came back to Los Angeles and I was asked to direct a live action short for the Walt Disney World MGM studio tour. They had an attraction which was like a screen test where they would take someone out of the audience and they would actually do a screen test. So they needed a show, a kind of a film to sort of get people up to speed about the idea. And so they would watch this in line to the show. And the story was about Mickey Mouse coming to Hollywood and being discovered. And it was called Mickey's Audition. And we hired Mel Brooks to play the director of the screen test, with jodhpurs and the beanie and the megaphone and the whole 9 yards. And I'll tell you, it was a trial by fire to direct for my first time live action with Mel Brooks on the set, running me ragged, making me crazy. It was totally, you know what it was? And I never thought about this until this minute. It was totally Bialystok and Bloom. I was Bloom, he was Bialystok, and I was like going, what do I do? What do I do? It was crazy. And so it was fun to come back, more than 20 years later and work with him again. He hasn't changed at all.
He's high energy.
He's high energy all the way. A lot of people who even know the show don't realize that Peabody adopted Sherman. They think, well, he was just sort of his ward. It was like he was his attaché, because that's kind of the way he treated. Well, there actually, if you had seen the pilot episode of the original show, we actually, I have to tell you, we actually stole a number of lines. I don't want to say stole, we borrowed, because, they owned them, so it wasn't like they stole them. We appropriated a number of lines from the original show. So the line from the judge who says, if a boy can adopt a dog, I see no reason why a dog cannot adopt a boy. That was actually a line verbatim in the original show. And it was interesting also because there was a lawyer in the original show arguing against Mr. Peabody adopting because he's a dog, and, why does that make sense? And so Peabody explains that he had to pull a few favors from a few friends in high places, and so one of them was the President of the United States that writes him a recommendation. So it was interesting. So when you looked at it and kind of went, oh, okay, so I guess they were sort of dealing with it on a level. And yet if you missed the pilot episode, which there's every reason to think you would have missed it and never caught up with it again somehow, that you wouldn't know that. And so it was fun for us to kind of dig back into it and sort of say, well, that's the way it was in its own time. And yet we could just sort of play up the fact that it's an alternative family, and that's even more relevant today than it was then.